Thank you to my patrons and to ZocDoc for making this video possible. You may or may not have seen Scream Queens, but I am sure that you have seen some of its most iconic moments, such as the introduction to Chanel No. 1.
My name is Chanel Oberlin, and I am the queen of Kappa Kappa Tau. These are my minions. I don't know their names. I don't want to know their names.
Chanel No. 2.
Chanel No. 3.
I'm Chanel Literacy. Despite the fact that it was so short-lived and met its end after a mere 2 seasons, Scream Queens is still beloved by many. It's constantly making the rounds as compilations, as memes. So many of them feature Chanel Oberlin and are more than a little worrying. Today's video is something I'm very excited about because we are doing a PowerPoint presentation deep dive into Scream Queens Season 1. After this, we will have a PowerPoint presentation deep dive into Scream Queens Season 2. So stay tuned for that. Scream Queens is the brainchild of the one, the only, Ryan Murphy. The man behind shows such as Glee, American Horror Story, American Crime Story, and Nip Tuck. Through these shows, Ryan Murphy built a relationship with the network Fox, and one day he sat down with the president of Fox and he said, "I want to make history." And he did. Scream Queens got a series order, no pilot, no scripts, just an idea. It was Glee meets American Horror Story, the camp comedy and the social hierarchy, the school setting of Glee mixed with the horror narratives of American Horror Story. You could also describe it as Mean Girls meets Friday the 13th, Heathers meets Halloween, Scream meets Pretty Little Liars. Whether or not you've seen Scream Queens, this video is for you. Like most Ryan Murphy shows, it is divisive. Ryan Murphy, I feel, is responsible for a lot of people's favorite and least favorite shows. I feel like you either love or hate, adore or abhor. And for Scream Queens, he teams up with the frequent collaborators Brad Falchuk and Ian Brennan. In this PowerPoint presentation deep dive, we will be doing an episode by episode recap. We will be analyzing the characters, the themes, the style. We'll be looking at the references to the classic horrors and looking at Scream Queens as a satire of the horror genre. I hope you like this new PowerPoint format. I tried it out on TikTok and YouTube Shorts for a breakdown of a different Ryan Murphy show, All's Fair, and people seem to really like it. So I thought I'd break it out for a long form video. I tried to do the same that I do for TikTok/Shorts, where I film myself with the projector, but we had some technical issues, so I hope everyone likes this little green screen insert mini-me. Also for a horror show, I think this will be easier on the eyes, both for you, the audience, and for the YouTube copyright demonetization overlords. YouTube has been very, very strict as of late with copyright, so I can't include as many clips and scenes as I would like, but we're doing our best. But you know what's scarier than a YouTube copyright claim? Making doctor's appointments, which is where today's sponsor, ZocDoc, can come in handy. I struggle with chronic period and hormone related issues, and I have done so for years, and it took me years to get a diagnosis of PCOS because I kept either putting off making doctor's appointments or forgetting to do them altogether. Trying to find a doctor is a full-time job. It is. You search online, but half the listings are outdated, the websites are broken, the doctors aren't taking new patients, or they don't accept your insurance. That's where ZocDoc comes in. Because ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly make an appointment. From mental health to dental, eye care, skincare, and everything in between, ZocDoc makes it easy to book in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers. With ZocDoc, you can filter for doctors by specialty, by insurance, by location, and you can see reviews from verified patients so you can find your best fit. When you've found the doctor you need, you can see their actual appointment openings, you can choose a time that fits for you, and with no awkward phone calls, you can instantly book a visit. ZocDoc appointments are typically within 24 to 72 hours, but you can also score same-day appointments. Head to ZocDoc.com/illiteracy or click the link in the description to find the doctor who gets it and provides you with the care that you deserve. Thank you, ZocDoc, for sponsoring this video. Scream Queens Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot. The year is 1995, and immediately this dripping pink title card establishes our bubblegum nightmare aesthetic. We open on a sorority party. A girl appears with her hands covered in blood, an homage to the classic Carrie, but this time it is not her blood. Our sorority pledge is after giving birth in a bathtub, and one of her sisters rightly points out, who told you that you could have a baby here tonight? And she says, guys, I'm so sorry. Like, obviously, I'm upset as anyone. This is super embarrassing. I hate to use the word unserious, but this show truly is very unserious in its tone. The gravity of unexpectedly giving birth is belittled into an inconvenience and a social faux pas, and like a lot of serious, deadly, violent things will happen to the characters, but their reactions won't always align, and in that disconnect is where the satire and the comedy will come in. Her sisters leave her in the bathtub because Waterfalls by TLC has come on, and Waterfalls is their jam.
I am not missing Waterfalls for this. Waterfalls is my jam.
When they go back upstairs, the pledge is dead, and we cut to our title card, Scream Queens. We're jumping 20 years in the future, which means that any baby born in the bathtub would now be about 20 years old. College aged. No reason to bring that up, I'm sure. And this is when we meet Chanel Oberlin, played by Emma Roberts, and Chanel 2, 3, and 5, played by Ariana Grande, Billie Lourd, and Abigail Breslin. There was a Chanel number 4, but to quote Chanel, she got meningitis and was like, I'm sick, I have to go home. And I was like, no, stay. But she went home anyway, and then she died. So another thing I was right about, Chanel goes to a meeting with the dean, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Through the cast alone, we already have an engagement with the horror genre because Jamie Lee Curtis played one of the most iconic horror heroines, Laurie, in the 1978 film Halloween. And Laurie is upheld as the quintessential final girl, a term coined by Carol Clover in her book Men, Women, and Chainsaws. For anyone interested in gender in horror, this is like one of the kind of foundational texts. Like, I studied film and specialized in gender and horror for my bachelor's, and this book is like the starting point for any conversations about gender and horror to this day. You could say that Jamie Lee Curtis is one of the most iconic scream queens. Yeah. Scream queen is the term for actresses who often or repeatedly play the lead in horror, and some present days include Maika Monroe, Jenna Ortega, Mia Goth, and Emma Roberts, because before Scream Queens, Emma Roberts was in American Horror Story Coven and Scream Queen 4. And a month before Scream Queens came out, Abigail Breslin starred in a film called Final Girl, which is not to be confused with The Final Girls, even though they both came out the same year and both star Alexander Ludwig. Don't know what was in the air that year. The title introduces us to the idea that this show will be full of references to the horror genre in a self-aware, campy tone. And Jamie Lee Curtis's involvement is the first of many nods to the slasher genre, which hit its peak in the 80s, and 80s nostalgia is a running theme throughout Ryan Murphy's work. American Horror Story 1984, Pose, and Monster Dahmer all took place in the 80s. There are loads of sorority slashers from the 80s, and Scream Queens is heavily inspired by the 1982 slasher The House on Sorority Row. I always look like this when I'm being hunted by a serial killer, you know, just kind of draped in a loose white sheet over my heaving bosom. Yeah, and The House on Sorority Row follows a slasher targeting, can you guess, a sorority, after the sisters cover up the death/murder of someone. Does it sound familiar? Because like Scream Queens, the girls may be hunted by a killer, but in a lot of ways, they killed first. The Scream Queens score is very synth heavy, very reminiscent of 80s music. Obviously, again, 80s slasher films. And speaking of the soundtrack, there's a sound effect that plays whenever anyone does something suspicious or suspects another character. It sounds like this. So be prepared to hear a lot of that. Back to the plot. Dean Munch is the newly appointed dean, and she hates sororities, and she hates Chanel. Chanel is also newly appointed to her role as Kappa president after the last president, Melanie Dorcas, had her skin burned off when someone replaced her spray tan fluid with sulfuric acid. We had another horror allusion, this time to Hitchcock's 1960 Psycho. Melanie pulls down the shower curtain a la Marion Crane, and we get a close-up of her eye, and in that eye we see the Red Devil. Dun dun dun. This is our villain, our killer, our slasher. And the Red Devil's costume reminds me of Ghostface from Scream, in that the costume kind of shrouds whoever's underneath it and conceals their identity, conceals their gender. So we don't know whether this person is male or female. Whereas a lot of slashers, the villain is very obviously male. Here, it's anyone's game. So I'll purposefully be referring to them as they, them, until we discover their identity. Munch thinks Chanel was the one in the Red Devil costume because she was the one to set up the spray tan. And yet Dean Munch hates sororities and would do anything to rid Wallace University of Kappa. If you think that I'm overusing this sound effect, I am actually giving you a taster of how often it is used in the show. Gigi, the Kappa national president, says that Munch can't get rid of Kappa's charter, but she does have an alternative. I'm going into this much detail for the first episode because it's sowing a lot of seeds that are very important. Next, we meet the main character, Grace, who's very close to her dad because she never knew her mom, who died when she was little. All she has of her mom is this sorority pin, and she thinks that joining Kappa will make her feel closer to her mom. Grace's roommate is Zayde Williams, played by the one, the only, Keke Palmer.
That's a slave hymn.
Keke Palmer truly has the charisma of a generation. I love her so much. Zayde wants to be president of the US one day, so Grace convinces her to pledge Kappa as a career move. That night, Grace stares, I would say menacingly, at the Kappa house, and we catch a glimpse of the Red Devil in the distance, but they mysteriously disappear. Gigi and Munch announce that Kappa must accept anyone who wants to pledge, and because of that, all of the normal sorority type girls leave. And we're left with Grace and Zayde, Hester, aka Neck Brace, played by Leah Michelle, Tiffany, aka Deaf Taylor Swift, a massive Swiftie, Sam, aka Predatory Les, and Jennifer, a candle vlogger on leaf.com.
4 stars.
We learn that Gigi always dresses in a very 90s-esque wardrobe because something traumatic happened to her that kept part of her psyche forever trapped in the 90s. Something traumatic from the 90s. Okay. Chanel's situationship/boyfriend is Chad Radwell, the president of the frat Dickie Dollar Scholars. Chad breaks up with Chanel because now her sorority is full of losers. Chad is played by Glenn Powell, and this is before he really shot to fame. And I gotta say, he is truly excellent in this role. His comedic acting, he is a fan favorite, and for good reason.
I'm a psychology major, so I'm gonna break this down into terms that you'll understand. My ego, it's super strong.
Chad's friend Boon is played by Nick Jonas, and Boon is clearly obsessed, maybe even in love with Chad. Next, we got one of the most famous, most quoted moments to come out of Scream Queens.
Actually, I just want a regular coffee. Those white girl pumpkin spice lattes annoy me.
Name?
Senorita Awesome.
Senorita Awesome. Grace is not like the other girls, and she's always wearing a hat, which I shouldn't find infuriating, but I do. Something about her just hats really annoy me. Her style is very twee, very Zooey Deschanel, very 2013 Tumblr. So Grace meets the barista Pete, who is a journalist with a college newspaper, but he also used to be obsessed with Chanel. Suspicious.
Miss Bean, let's hit it!
Chanel devises a plan with Miss Bean, the housekeeper, and I feel like Miss Bean is a reference to Dorota from Gossip Girl. And when we first see Miss Bean, Chanel calls her White Mammy, which is a reference to the black house slave and caricature Mammy from Gone with the Wind.
If I asked you if you knew something about birth and babies, or if you didn't know nothing about birth and no babies, what would you say?
But the humor here doesn't exactly land for me, and this is an issue that I have sometimes with Scream Queens, because sometimes the shock humor veers just into racism or outright bigotry, and there's actually no humor in it. It's just a racist character saying racist things, and here we already know that Chanel is a terrible person, so I don't really understand the point of this. There are other ways that Scream Queens will poke fun at how sororities are typically very white and racist.
We have a side boob mixer followed by a white party, where everyone is encouraged to wear/be white.
But this doesn't feel like any fun. It just feels like the racism. Caroline Framke wrote an article for Vox. Now, the joke here is supposed to be that Chanel number 1 is awful enough to use a term like white mammy and find it hilarious. But as the episode progresses and Chanel continues to spew hateful racist garbage, an alarming truth emerges. This show loves Chanel. Murphy's direction lingers on her stacked wardrobe, her immaculately assembled outfits, her dead-eyed glare at whomever was foolish enough to cross her. Yeah, Chanel's a total racist, Scream Queens seems to be saying, but isn't she spectacular? She also points out that Murphy's shows have often, quote, depended on racism to sell its unsavory characters or amp up their shock value, such as the real historical figure Madame Delphine Lalaurie, who brutally tortured slaves and features an American Horror Story coven, or Ellen Barkin in The New Normal, whose main gag is that she can't stop saying racist jokes. I agree, and I think that it is lazy writing. And when the mouthpiece of such vitriol is a character who is so beloved and iconic, we are simultaneously encouraged to love Chanel and hate the things that she says. And when her bigotry doesn't go so extreme as to be like obviously absurd and making fun of how bigoted she is, then it ends up just being bigotry, which I find bizarre. Chanel plans to get the loser pledges out of Kappa and prevent it from being overtaken by ethnics and fatties. Chanel will stage an argument with Miss Bean and then pretend to fry Miss Bean's face off. And then we get Chanel's coffee order. A Trenta, no foam, 5-shot, half calf, no foam, pumpkin spice latte with no foam at 210 degrees. Chanel discovers a hate shrine in Miss Bean's room and confronts her, and she plunges her head into the oil as planned. But when she does that, it sizzles. Someone has turned the fryer on, and Chanel burns Miss Bean's face off, and she collapses, dead. Miss Bean, deceased. Chanel forces everyone to help her hide the body, which makes them accessories to murder, which she will then use to blackmail anyone who dares go against her. And I know that the word accessory isn't exclusively a fashion word, but whenever I hear the word accessory to murder, I'm like, a killer scarf, some deadly gloves. Bad joke. We got the iconic quote,
You're an awful person.
Maybe. But I'm rich and I'm pretty, so it doesn't really matter.
Then we see Dean Munch enjoying a post-coital smoke with Chad Radwell. She is blackmailing Chad Radwell with academic probation, but he ends up falling in love with Dean Munch. And this starts an arc where Munch is highly sexually and romantically desirable, and any man that sleeps with her falls in love with her and says that she is the best they've ever had. It turns her into this like sex symbol, which is actually quite subversive because in so much media, an older woman or a middle-aged woman is like desexualized and never desired. Dean Munch was a very active second wave feminist, but she hates the younger generation because she feels like they take everything for granted. And to get a little film scholar on you, Dean Munch is the only one who's smoking the joint. She holds the joint, you know, a cigarette is a phallic symbol, and the fact that she possesses it denotes how she holds power. Yeah, Pete confronts Grace and he says, I know you guys killed Ms. Bean. And then Grace teams up with him to be the like inside source for his Kappa expose. A note on Grace, and I know that this is purposeful, at least I think, but Grace is so uninteresting and annoying. And I also think that Pete is pretty bland, but Pete and Grace are like kind of straight men. You know, they're the ones who kind of act semi-normal compared to everybody else. But Grace is so self-righteous and goody-goody, and she acts like she's really morally superior when in actuality she's as self-interested as anybody else, and the only reason that she is doing any of this Kappa stuff is to find out stuff about her mom. Grace and Pete break into the freezer, but Chanel and Chad are also there, and we learn that Chad is turned on by dead bodies. Miss Bean's body has disappeared, and Chanel attempts a Kraft-esque blood oath ritual to swear everyone to silence, but Chanel number 2 decides to leave, and while she's packing, she gets a text reminiscent of both the iconic horror film Scream and the teen drama Pretty Little Liars. Chanel 2 has a text exchange with the Red Devil, and this is very obviously a spoof of Scream where the killer calls their victims. The Red Devil stabs Chanel number 2, but instead of screaming, she texts him to stop. And then with her dying breath, she tweets out, "The Red Devil is murdering me." Chanel number 2 deceased. The reference to Scream extends to the actresses because in Scream, Drew Barrymore was the biggest star and shocked audiences by being the first victim. And here we have Ariana Grande, similarly the biggest star, and she gets killed off in the first episode. Chanel takes all of this to mean that Miss Bean is alive and exacting revenge. Then at the end of the episode, all of the pledges, except for Grace, are buried up to their necks a la Heather's. And also the Chanels all having the same name is also a reference to Heather's. But along comes the Red Devil on a lawnmower and they mow off Tiffany's head. Tiffany, aka Dead Taylor Swift, deceased. And that is how we end our pilot. So let's look at the death tally so far. We have Miss Bean was murdered by Chanel, we think. Chanel number 2 and Tiffany were both murdered by the Red Devil. Now, our suspect list. And this is the great thing about Scream Queens. At any point, anyone and everyone is a suspect. And the red herrings, especially in the first half of the season, I think are spectacular. In the second half, I would say the quality overall dips a little, but we will get into that. In Scream Queens, everyone is constantly flip-flopping as to whether or not they could be the killer, as to who they're suspicious of, and it exaggerates the paranoia of a normal horror film. So Chanel maybe attacked Melanie, definitely attacked and killed Miss Bean, or Miss Bean could still be alive and exacting revenge. Munch hates sororities, Pete hates Chanel, Grace has sorority mommy issues, Chad loves dead bodies, and Gigi had something traumatic to her happen in the 90s. I think just for the first 2 episodes, Ryan Murphy had the actors do takes where each of them acted as if they were the killer, and then they chopped all that up into the episodes so that we truly never know who the killer is. It could be anyone, it could be all of these people, it could be none of these people. We just have to keep watching to find out. Episode 2. Hell Week. There is a media frenzy at Kappa after Tiffany, aka Deaf Taylor Swift, was murdered. Nobody knows about Miss Bean and Chanel number 2 yet. Munch assures us that everything is fine and that there is even cause for celebration.
And Frogurt is back after popular demand in the dining hall.
Gigi, Munch, and the lead detective force all of the pledges to move into Kappa House, and they're not allowed to leave. And they say that it's for their safety, but we all know that this is going to make it easier for the killer to pick them off one by one. Before the security guard comes, they hide Chanel number 2's body in the freezer with the help of Hester, aka Neck Brace, who reveals herself to be a little freak obsessed with death, and she knows how to cut up a body.
Pulverize her teeth, burn off her fingerprints, and disfigure her face. Once her body is unrecognizable, we can create an incision on her inner thigh and drain out all of her bodily fluids. That'll give us more time to deconstruct the body.
And the fact that the police are investigating a sorority death and didn't find Chanel number 2's body is not a plot hole. The police in this show are hilariously inept, and they parody how useless cops are in most horror films. To keep the girls safe, Gigi hires Denise Hempel of Secure Enforcement Solutions, and she does not seem like the most competent of security guards. She doesn't even have a gun. Denise is played by Niecy Nash, who is an absolute scene stealer. Since Chanel number 1 burned Miss Bean's face off, now all the pledges have to scrub the floors, and when Grace goes to get more soap in the basement, we can see the Red Devil outside. Grace discovers a secret door, a door to which only the Kappa president has the key. Grace tells Pete, and in the heat of the moment, they kiss. She breaks in and she finds a bloody bathtub and a party mix CD with waterfalls on it. Chanel catches her and reveals the rumor that a pledge died giving birth in that bathtub 20 years ago at a party. And we learn that Munch and Miss Bean helped to cover it up. And a silly thing that I love in this show is that whenever there's a flashback, they just put the actor in a wig and they make no other effort to make them look younger. It really reminds me of Dexter, when teen Dexter was Michael C. Hall in a Justin Bieber wig. That was the height of cinema. Pete breaks into Munch's office. I love that gag. Okay. And he finds a list of names in a folder called Kappa House Party, 1995. Again, how obvious everything is and how absurd this mystery is, I just love. It's part of the campiness. It's part of the satire. Pete is knocked unconscious by the Red Devil. But then Grace goes back to Pete's and finds a Red Devil costume in his wardrobe. And she's like, what is this? And he says, yeah, okay, I'm the school mascot. And we learn the Red Devil is the school mascot, which is a great choice for the killer because that means they can just stroll around campus and no one will bat an eye. But we get these like film noir-esque shots, and now Grace is suspicious of Pete. Chanel breaks up with Chad because he keeps saying weird like necrophiliac stuff in bed. And when he returns to the Dickie Dollar Scholar's house, Chad's roommate Boon is like, I'm kind of scared with all this murder going around. Like they're saying there's like a serial killer or something. Like, can I maybe get into bed with you? And he does, and they kind of spoon. Boon is over the covers.
Hey, wait, come on.
Chanel decides to make up with Chad, but when she opens the door to their bedroom and sees them, she storms back out. But Chad is mad at Chanel, and he's like, so what if Boon is gay? What's wrong with that? But you better not fucking tell anyone. And then he breaks up with her. Boon then comes out as gay to the Chanels, and he asks to join Kappa. And Chanel says yes because it's good for her brand, because she wants to be a network news anchor. And she says, I am a future network news anchor. That involves a little thing called the media, which is chock full of gays. If I presided over the first sorority to let in a gay, imagine how far that would get me with my gay makeup person, my gay wardrobe person, not to mention my creepy, gross gay viewers and my weird gay higher-ups. Denise's friend and fellow Secure Enforcement Solutions officer, Chandel, joins Denise, and we get a reference to the hit crime podcast, Serial.
Name one bad thing that ever happened at a Best Buy parking lot.
The murder of Heyman Lee was covered in season 1 of Serial, and that was thought to have occurred in a Best Buy car park. Grace's dad is sitting out in his car, keeping an eye on things, and Gigi goes out to have a word with him, saying, this is kind of weird, you should give Grace some space. But they end up hitting it off and go out for coffee. Dean Munch sees this, and she is furiously jealous because she too likes Wes. Chanel is hazing the girls by writing insults on their bodies, and she calls Zayde a hood rat. And this is kind of what I was saying earlier of like sometimes the shocking humor isn't this like bold, daring statement. In this instance, it's just racism, and we already know Chanel's a terrible person, so this doesn't really achieve anything. It's neither funny nor like develops anything. And she goes to get white eyeliner so she can write on Zayde's body. Back to that article for Vox. When the central, most lovingly glamorous character of your series is calling the sole black pledge a hood rat and running to grab white eyeliner so she can better write epithets on her dark skin, you're not making any kind of interesting commentary, you're indulging gross behavior in the guise of calling it out. Another thing that I felt like was all offense, no humor, was the predatory Les character. I think that it would have been like absurd and poking fun at this stereotype had Sam shown no interest in any of the other girls, but there was one moment where she confessed to spying on Chanel 3 when she was changing.
Then I was spying on you the other day while you're changing.
And I feel like this isn't a funny, campy, subversive use of a trope or a stereotype. It's literally just playing into the homophobic stereotype, which is especially bizarre coming from Ryan Murphy, who is a gay man. So Chanel goes upstairs to get white eyeliner to write on Zayde's body, and as the great once in a generational talent, Jojo Siwa once sang, karma's a bitch, and Chanel's attacked by the Red Devil, but she manages to fight them off. And we get a little joke about the stupidity of characters in the horror genre, where everyone is running upstairs straight to the killer, and Denise is like, why are you not running out the front door? Denise then goes to her car, where she discovers that Chandel has been murdered by the Red Devil. She starts to drive away, then stops, pushes Chandel's body out of the car, and then continues driving. Boon is working out, and the Red Devil comes in, and he says, what took you so long? And it's a very calm, I would say familiar kind of demeanor. But then Boon's dead body is laid out on the Dickie Dollar Scholar's dining table. His throat slit. And at the end of the episode, the Red Devil goes to the morgue, opens up Boon's container. I don't know what the word would be for it. And we're like, is the Red Devil going to steal this body? What's going on? Boon opens his eyes. The throat slit was fake. It was makeup. Another testament to how useless the police are. And then it's the end of the episode. I don't know why they immediately told us that Boon faked his death, because he disappears now at the end of episode 2 until the end of episode 8. I feel like this reveal could have been more shocking had they implemented it a little further down the line, because it builds up the suspense, but then it's just dropped for like 6 episodes. So now to our suspect sheet, we have to add Boon as, I would say, suspect number 1, but also Hester because she's obsessed with death and she knows how to get rid of a body. And Pete is looking pretty suspicious at the moment. For the death tally, we have the only addition is Chandel, who was killed by the Red Devil. And we're moving right along to episode 3, Chainsaw. Chanel number 5 goes to look at Chanel number 2's body for fun. but discovers it's missing. Denise, Grace, and Zayday discover that Chanel number 2 is missing, and then Denise takes out some luminol, sprays it on the carpet, and discovers a big blood stain.
Maybe it's blood.
Of course, it's blood.
Not only that, but Denise points out that Chanel also tweeted that the Red Devil was murdering her. And Grace is like, oh, but she's still posting on Instagram. Let's take a little closer look at that picture. Wait. I love how idiotic the characters are. Like, Grace is supposed to be the smart one, and she's fooled by this little Weekend at Bernie's number. This headband keeps slowly, like, trying to come off my head, so I gotta take her off. Okay, the three of them go to Bel Air to talk to Chanel's parents, and her mom is played by Charisma Carpenter, aka Cordelia from Buffy. Her parents do not care that she's missing, and they're like, ugh, she's probably on a bender again. But they reveal that Chanel number 2 also dated Chad Radwell. Grace's dad gets a job as a film studies professor in order to be closer to Grace, and the first film that he shows is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then for the rest of this episode, the Red Devil's weapon of choice will be a chainsaw. At a Take Back the Night rally, Dean Munch announces that they now have a new, less menacing mascot, Coney. Wow, Coney is so joyful, so full of life. I hope nothing happens to him. Cut in half with a chainsaw by the Red Devil. Chanel number 3 tells Sam, aka Predatory Les, her deepest, darkest secret, which is that Charles Manson is her biological father. But she does not want to tell anyone because she's worried that people will think that she is the Red Devil if she reveals this. The house has a Days Without a Kappa Getting Murdered sign, which I adore. Chanel number 1 gives Hester, aka Neckbrace, a makeover because she thinks that if she can transform all the losers of Kappa into hotties, then she can restore their reputation. Across this season, for the Chanels, the like uncool pledges are a bigger threat than the serial killer that's on the loose. Could this be a commentary on how certain people think that diversity and inclusion or political correctness pose more of a threat to the social order and is a more immediate threat than violence? In America, with the current government attacking DEI and doing nothing to curb gun violence, I'd say it's pretty accurate. Munch and Gigi move in to keep an eye on things, and Chad thinks it's weird that Boon's death was ruled a suicide.
I saw footprints leading away from the body. This pair of bloody footprints led downstairs to the bathroom, stopped in front of the toilet, and then led back to the body.
So the Dickie Dollar Scholars go on a vigilante mission, which is soundtracked and a reference to the Backstreet Boys, and it's also a reference to Clockwork Orange. We discover there's not one, but 2 Red Devils, and one of them chops off both of Frat Bros Caulfield's arm, and this is a very Monty Python inspired move. He survives, by the way. Denise thinks that Zayday is the killer because she found a chainsaw under her bed, but Zayday says her grandma gave it to her. Gigi and Wes are having a little salad date, and Munch is third wheeling, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I love the gag of like 8 salad dressings on the table. Munch and Gigi are sharing a room, and Munch is the originator of the mind if I play some white noise.
I'll set the machine to slasher movie, and we'll leave it at that.
Gigi goes to sleep downstairs where she's attacked by the Red Devil, but manages to fight them off. And Wes and Gigi find it very suspicious that Munch ran downstairs right after the Red Devil disappeared, and they accuse her of being the Red Devil. End of episode 3. Suspect sheet. Zayday is a new addition because Denise suspects her, and it is kind of weird that she got a chainsaw from her grandma the same week that the Red Devil decided to use a chainsaw as the murder weapon. To the death tally, we just have one addition, but it weighs heavy on us all. Rest in peace, Coney. Episode 4, Haunted House. This is a Halloween episode, or should I say Chanel-oween. Chanel-oween is a direct parody of Taylor Swift's Swiftmas, where she gave fans Christmas presents. Genuinely, the filmmakers did like a shot-for-shot remake of Swiftmas.
This package is from Mallory. This is actually a Hanukkah present.
This severed hand is for Mallory. These razor apples for Daisy.
Impress me with your frumpy spirit.
You are so devastatingly mediocre and adorable!
It's all about you.
And I can't play the full thing, but it is It's very well done. And there's one moment where Chanel is giving one of her fans a gift, and instead of handing it to her, she like puts it on the floor and slides it across the floor. And I truly think that Emma Roberts shines in this role. I know she's played the kind of mean girl a few times, but I do think her comedic timing and her like delivery in this season is very funny. Chanel says that she is not doing this out of the kindness of her own heart. She is doing this to make herself more popular and improve her brand image as a future network newscaster. She makes the implicit explicit. The lead detective, Chisholm, interrogates Munch but finds nothing suspicious. And Denise then breaks the news that Caulfield had both his arms chopped off, and she learns this before it even comes over the police radio, which again shows how useless the police are. Grace and Pete are in their investigative journalist era, and they track down a survivor of the 1995 bathtub incident, Mandy Greenwell, and they are dressed as Kate Hudson and Matthew McConaughey from How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, and Pete / the actor Diego Boneta does an amazing Matthew McConaughey impression.
I'm a vault, and to get in this vault you need a key. Now you may ask, a key to what? It's a key to meaning.
Mandy reveals that Munch made them bury the body and told them to never speak to one another again. And this whole time, Grace and Pete think that the bathtub baby was Chad Radwell and that he is the Red Devil. But now we learn the mysterious bathtub baby was a girl. Grace, being the self-centered narcissist that she is, was like, oh my God, I'm the baby in the bathtub. And she goes to her dad and is like, you've been lying to me. Which at this point I can neither confirm nor deny. That night someone's knocking around Mandy's trailer and she is killed by the Red Devil. Zayde announces her bid to run for president of Kappa, and here we get one of my favorite Chanel lines.
All your voters are in this room. You could have just told us.
Hey Jennifer, can you hop off the spectrum for just a second?
This one goes out to Jennifer, a fellow YouTuber on the spectrum. To kick off her presidential campaign, Zayde is hosting a haunted house fundraiser for sickle cell anemia at an abandoned house on Shady Lane. Wow, I sure hope nothing nefarious is going to happen at the abandoned haunted house on a place called Shady Lane when a serial killer is on the loose. Chad goes to the graveyard for a little bit of self-pleasure time, and Hester then hits on him and flirts with him in an attempt to steal him from Chanel. They later meet at the haunted house where they discover Miss Bean's body laid out like Annie in Halloween. Then again, in a like Halloween-esque sequence, they find the bodies of Shondell, Coney, damn, Coney, gone too soon, Chanel number 2, and Mandy. The news of the dead bodies spread and make the haunted house a hot attraction, and when Zayde tries to shut it down, she is kidnapped by the Red Devil. Earlier in this episode, Denise and Pete went to the library.
I did some research down at the library. Wait, last night? I didn't see you there. Which library? Baker Street? Oh, okay.
I love some queens that support their local library. They discovered that there was a hag of Shady Lane who would steal diapers, milk, and children's toys, and the hag could be heard wailing / sobbing from the street. And at the end of the episode, it's revealed the hag was Gigi. She was taking care of the baby in the bathtub. Death tally, new addition, is Mandy Greenwell. Now, going back to our suspect list, Zayde learns that Denise tried to pledge Kappa, but she was denied for being black, which gives her motive to get revenge on Kappa and puts her on the suspect list. Gigi has moved to the top because she was the hag of Shady Lane. Chad and Hester did find the bodies, but we know that there are 2 Red Devils, so that doesn't rule either of them off the list. And Boon is still missing. Some other fun horror references this episode. Mandy is watching Leprechaun when the Red Devil attacks her, and Wes shows his class Children of the Corn. Episode 5, Pumpkin Patch. Chanel decides to hold a rival fundraiser to Zayde for black hairy tongue disease, and the maze that she's setting up is going to be an exact replica of the maze from The Shining. All the Chanels are going to dress up as wives of assassinated presidents. Obviously, Chanel number 1 is Jackie O, and here we have tension brewing with Chanel number 5, because Chanel number 1 very obviously hates Chanel number 5 and is always making digs at her.
You're a Mary Todd Lincoln if ever there was one.
That's it! I can't take this anymore!
That is such a Mary Todd Lincoln thing to say. There's the door.
There's the door, bitch!
And Chanel number 5 storms off. And this makes us think, could she be capable of murder? Again, at this point, can neither confirm nor deny. And then in this episode, we get the title sequence for the first time. In it, we get a reference to Nightmare on Elm Street, which is kind of fun. Munch finally decides to shut down campus and instate a curfew. It only took 6 murders and several more attacks. Chanel number 5, Hester and Jennifer, aka Candle Blogger, pictured here wearing an ant mask, decide to set up Chanel and they get her arrested for Miss Bean's murder. And we get a fun true crime reference here.
Oh my god, I'm burping uncontrollably like Robert Durst. They'll know I'm guilty.
Robert Durst is the murderer and subject of the HBO docuseries The Jinx. And spoiler alert, when the filmmakers corner him at the end of the series, he kept burping out of nervousness in the interview. Zayday is being held in the Red Devil's lair, and this is a very deliberate reference to Silence of the Lambs. The Red Devil also holds a fluffy white dog like Buffalo Bill. Chanel is in prison for about 2 seconds, and we get an Orange is the New Black reference here with a trans inmate a la Laverne Cox's character. Chanel number 3 very quickly bails her out.
Well, technically my dad did. I told him college textbooks are getting crazy expensive, so he wired me $300,000. No questions asked.
And as punishment for backstabbing her, Chanel number 5 must light all the jack-o'-lanterns, and she brings with her the twins Roger and Dodger, both of whom she's sleeping with. Yeah, there are some weird incest implications here, but we're actually not even going to get into that. Obviously, the Red Devil arrives and chases them through the maze, again in a very Shining-esque sequence, and Dodger ends up dead in the same pose as Jack from The Shining. The gang tracks Zayday's phone to the Red Devil's lair and are determined to rescue her.
Hey, everybody take a taser.
What am I supposed to do with this?
Not a damn thing, darling little old lady.
But by the time they get there, Zayday's gone. Here we get another Silence of the Lambs sequence where the killer wears night vision goggles and they attack Gigi and escape. Zayday arrives back at Cabba House and reveals that the Red Devil actually treated her really well. They gave her Keel's skincare. Again, in Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill makes the women he kidnaps put on moisturizer. So there's a little tiny little reference there. The Red Devil sets up a romantic dinner for her. I love the little the Red Devil does. I think it's so funny. She stabbed them in the hand with a fork and got away. Gigi is walking through campus and the Red Devil is following her. But it turns out Gigi is in cahoots with the Red Devil. Much to unpack. I feel like this was a fun reveal. I feel like it makes sense. I think they sowed the seeds of her having something traumatic happen to her in the 90s, and then she was the hag of Shady Lane. She raised the bathtub baby, and we can kind of assume, maybe, that the Red Devil is then the baby from the bathtub. But we still have some questions. Was Gigi Red Devil number 2, or is she in charge of 2 Red Devils? Can neither confirm nor deny. And it's extra menacing because she is now dating Grace's dad, Weston, and she's also the head of Kappa. So she's infiltrated into the social networks. 1 death for the tally, Dodger. Episode 6, 7 Minutes in Hell. This is what we in the industry call a bottle episode. Pretty much all of the action takes place in one location, which is the Kappa House. The girls decide to have a slumber party, and Zayday is elected as president of Kappa, but Chanel says that she threw the election so that Zayday would be targeted by the killer and not her. And Zayday says,
"The biggest change I'd like to implement is for everyone to stop getting murdered by a serial killer."
They play Spin the Bottle, and Chanel number 3 kisses Sam, and there's a blossoming romance there. We learn Chanel number 3's earmuffs are not just a nod to Billy Lord's mom, Carrie Fisher, who played Princess Leia, but she also wears them because a guy was so obsessed with her ears that he threatened to cut them off. Are we all liking? I love how absurd these are. Look how they're huge. I don't know how I could possibly wear them outside. Look how big they are. The girls are locked in, not in a grind set kind of way. They are trapped. Luckily, the Dickie Dollar Scholars were already on their way over to Kappa for a panty raid, so they scale a ladder to get in, but the Red Devil arrives and poor armless Caulfield doesn't make it up in time. Yeah. Everyone plays Truth or Dare, which Chad Radwell takes very seriously.
Can't lie.
But
I'm sorry, the game's pretty damn simple, okay? It's truth or dare.
Sam has to reveal Chanel number 3's deepest, darkest secret. So she tells everyone that Charles Manson is her father. And in retaliation, Chanel number 3 dares Sam to go down to the basement where the bathtub is. And when Sam gets to the basement, she's murdered by the Red Devil. And this murder is a reference to the slasher Black Christmas, where a killer targets a sorority house and kills someone with a plastic bag, as you can see pictured here. Sam, deceased. Hester is the one to find Sam's body in the tub, which everyone finds a little suspicious. Meanwhile, upstairs, Chanel number 5 is making out with Roger, but the Red Devil sneaks up and shoots him with a nail gun. And then his death is a reference to Hellraiser. Rest in peace. Chad discovers the entrance to a secret tunnel in the wardrobe. Secret tunnel? That's very Avatar The Last Airbender, Book 2, Chapter 2. If you know, you know. Chanel and Zayde explore the tunnels where, obviously, they're attacked by the Red Devil. Zayde almost gets killed, but Chanel saves her. End of episode 6. We are now at the mid-season point, and I think it would be good to do a little check-in on how we're doing, how we're feeling, you know, look at our death tally, our suspect list, and discuss the plot so far. We have 3 deaths this episode. So, rest in peace, Caulfield, Sam, and Roger. I also rearranged the kills so that it's in chronological order, starting with Miss Ariana. We have 9 Red Devil murders, 1 Chanel murder. And I feel 2 ways about the character deaths. On the one hand, I do love how, like, again, unserious the deaths are and how nobody really cares about them. Everybody's kind of just going about their business. Chanel number 5 is always being labeled as really dramatic for crying about Roger and Dodger's death. She's always being told to get over it, and nobody ever really seems to be sad or grieve anyone. None of the deaths have much impact. But on the other hand, that's also where my issue lies, because the deaths don't have much impact. And as you can see, almost all of the characters who've died so far have been side characters. A bunch of them show up and then are killed the same episode, like 10 minutes later. So at this point, I'm thinking that I would like to see a main character death sometime soon. You know, Chad, one of the Chanels, Grace or Zayde. I don't know, like, as I said, I like the silliness, but I feel like we need to start changing things up in the second half. And we know the police are incompetent, which is hilarious for the satire, but it also means that there's no, like, suspense or tension for whether or when characters will get caught for their crimes. Like, Chanel was arrested and bailed out 5 minutes later, which again, hilarious, but plot-wise, it, like, doesn't do anything. So, our suspect sheet. We can remove Miss Bean because we know that she's dead. I'm gonna clear the suspect sheet to show some things that we know for certain. We know that there are 2 Red Devils. We know Gigi is in league with the Red Devil and raised the baby in the bathtub. Again, is she one of the devils, or is she in charge of the 2 devils? We know Boon faked his death and is working with the Red Devil. Could he be one of them? We know Pete has a Red Devil costume in his wardrobe that he claims is because he's the school mascot, and we know the baby in the bathtub was a girl. But in terms of, like, plot and mystery, we are now halfway through the season and we don't really know that much. I do feel like with the last episode and with some to come, the only plot relevant things that happen are character deaths, but as we just discussed, none of these deaths are very impactful. My dream for this season, I think this would have been perfect as like a 10 episode or even less season rather than 13. It was also originally supposed to be 15, which is crazy. I think 10 episodes would have been perfect for this show. It would have trimmed some of the filler, and for the second half of this PowerPoint presentation, the episode summaries get a bit shorter because there are a lot of red herrings and dead ends that aren't that interesting and just end up like stretching out the show instead of adding anything. That being said, there's still much more to come, so let's go straight into episode 7, Beware of Young Girls. This episode opens with Chanel number 2's funeral because, if you remember, in the haunted house, we discovered all of the previously stolen / disappeared dead bodies. We get some great comedy, including a very astute joke about Miss Ariana Grande.
It's too bad you had to die before we found out what ethnicity you are.
It's like they saw right into the future. The Chanels use a Ouija board to contact Chanel number 2, and the ghost of Chanel 2 warns Chanel number 1 that her minions are mutinying. Chanel 3, 5, and Hester, aka Chanel number 6, are plotting to kill Chanel because they think that she's the Red Devil. And in classic Chanel fashion, she scolds them for their ill-thought-out plan to murder her with rat poison.
So not only would I have survived your attempt on my life, it would have also made me skinnier.
Chanel convinces them that Grace and Zayde are actually the Red Devils and gives them a gift of Nancy Drew hats and magnifying glasses, which is a little meta joke because Emma Roberts played Nancy Drew in the 2007 film Nancy Drew. Gigi tips off Grace to investigate former Kappa sister Feather McCarthy, played by Tabby Gevinson. Feather had an affair with Dean Munch's ex-husband, and he left Munch for her. Munch tried to murder Feather by pushing a transistor radio into the bathtub. How was it that Munch's predecessor died?
I snuck into the home of my 80-year-old colleague of 20 years and dropped a transistor radio in her bathtub so I could get a 5% raise.
Right. Interesting. Stephen Munch is murdered. And the head in the aquarium is a reference to the 1980 slasher He Knows You're Alone. Munch is arrested for this murder and institutionalized in an asylum before she is exonerated because of DNA evidence, which implicates Feather. Feather is then locked up Hannibal Lecter style, and it turns out that Dean Munch actually framed Feather, but none of this really matters and it doesn't come back up again. I think it's just supposed to make us more suspicious of Munch because she's a murderer. This episode has a lot of back and forth, a lot of miscommunications, and though we can add Stephen Munch to the death tally, there was no real Red Devil development, aka actual plot development, and this episode was criticized. It got negative reviews and it was called a filler episode, and honestly, I would tend to agree. Episode 8, Mommy Dearest. This title might be a reference to the 1981 film Mommy Dearest, or is it a reference maybe to my video, Mommy Fearest, where I analyzed motherhood and horror? We'll never know. What we do know is that one of the principal themes in horror, as I analyzed in that video, is mommy issues. Bad mothers are responsible for creating monsters, for unwillingly giving birth to monsters. The mother is monstrous in some way. Motherhood is so often monstrous or breeds monstrosity in some form in the horror genre. And this goes all the way back to Psycho. And speaking of Psycho, the star of Psycho is Janet Leigh, mother to Jamie Lee Curtis. Janet Leigh is most famous for her role as Marion Crane in Psycho, and Psycho has perhaps one of the most famous, most analyzed, most parodied, and most imitated scenes in all of cinema. The shower scene. And in this episode of Scream Queens, we get a recreation of the shower scene by Jamie Lee Curtis, which has so many levels because, again, it is daughter imitating mother. How layered this is. The original scene is obviously the brutal attack of a woman by a man. And whether or not you've seen Psycho, you've likely seen the shower scene, and we all know how it ends. And Scream Queens knows that you know this and subverts your expectations because the scene begins as normal, but when the Red Devil peels back the curtain, Munch isn't there. She sneaks up behind them and attacks them. And she says, "I've seen that movie 50 times. So the show is like directly acknowledging the reference, which I think is pretty fun. Munch then faces off against not one, not two, but 3 attackers. 2 in a Red Devil costume and 1 in a Justice Scalia costume. And Justice Scalia was on the Supreme Court from 1986 till his death in 2016. He was very conservative, anti-LGBT, anti-abortion, anti-affirmative action, etc., etc. The reference in Scream Queens was a little lost on me. I don't know if it's because I'm not American or if it's dated or if it just wasn't very funny to begin with. For everyone who's going to comment like, "Oh my god, you're not American? I thought you were American until you said this." I am Irish. My accent's a little American because I lived there when I was younger, but I am 100% full-blooded Irish. Anyways, Scream Queens doesn't engage with politics in general, besides some references to like second versus third wave feminism, and it obviously pokes fun at the like enormous wealth of the characters, but I wouldn't exactly call it a social satire. In terms of satire, it's very much a satire of the horror genre, so this like random political appearance throws off the tone and humor, in my opinion. Dean Munch is an expert in hand-to-hand combat and defeats all the attackers who end up escaping. So now we know that there are 3 killers. One of them is presumably Gigi, 1 Boon, and then maybe the baby in the bathtub, potentially. I think this multiple killers makes it especially difficult for both the audience and the characters to figure out who the killers are. You know, multiple killers is not a new thing, but the max that I've ever seen has been 2. But, you know, obviously in Scream Queen fashion, they're going to take everything that's established and multiply it by 100 or 1.5. This makes it especially hard to figure out who the killer is because two people could have an alibi while the third attacks or kills someone. So trying to keep track of characters' whereabouts doesn't mean that you can figure out who the killer is. After Munch is targeted by the Red Devil, she's like, ooh, this Red Devil thing's kind of bad. Maybe somebody should do something about this. She tells Grace who the bathtub mother was, and to Grace's great disappointment, it was not her mother. Munch says what we're all thinking.
You act like you are this benevolent champion of justice. Really, at the end of the day, this is just about you finding out who your mommy is.
Back at Kappa, but our fave candle vlogger, Jennifer, is filming a review on leaf.com when the Red Devil breaks in and kills her. It's so funny going to each next slide and seeing my notes on them and being like, this show is crazy. Grace and Pete go to the local asylum and talk to a patient there who paints everybody who visits / is committed. So she has a visual log of everyone who's been there, basically. And they discover that Gigi was there. And, you know, she was the hag of Shady Lane. We know that she was raising the baby in the bathtub. Babies. The babies in the bathtub, twins. A boy and a girl. I'll give you a moment to take all that in. Moving right along. Chanel hires detectives from Scotland Yard to investigate Grace and Zayde and dig up evidence that they are the Red Devil. And then Chanel delivers the results of their investigation to Grace. And we learn Grace's mom was Bethany Stevens, aka the Kappa president in 1995, who left Sophia Doyle to bleed out in the bathtub while she danced to Waterfalls by TLC. Bethany got pregnant that night after she slept with Wes. Young Wes is obviously the same actor in a baseball cap. I love this show. Then to cover up her involvement in Sophia's death, Bethany changed her name to Mary Mulligan, and after she gave birth to Grace, she spiraled. She was arrested for shoplifting, petty larceny, grand larceny, drunk driving with a baby in her lap, drunk driving with a baby on top of her car, and possession of methamphetamine with intent to distribute. Wes then sued for custody of Grace and won, and he burned down their house in order to get rid of any evidence so that Grace would never know who her mother was, and Mary died 1 year later in a drunk driving accident. This obviously shakes Grace to her core, but beyond the impact on Grace herself, this does not alter the mystery at all and or have any actual plot relevance. Chanel and Grace both bond over the fact that they have terrible mothers. And at the end of the episode, who turns up in the college gym but Boon? He's back, but he's in disguise. And everyone thinks that Boon is Joaquin Phoenix, which I genuinely do think is very funny. On the phone to the Red Devil, he says, all I do is work out and kill people. And then him and that Red Devil plot to get rid of Gigi, and we learned that she was the one in the Justice Scalia mask. Rest in peace, Jennifer. So, we know Gigi was in the Justice Scalia costume. Boon is definitely one Red Devil, and we can kind of guess that he's the male baby from the bathtub. And we don't know who the third killer is, but the principal suspect is the other female baby from the bathtub. You might be picking up from the shorter summaries with these episodes, there's really not much happening here plot-wise. You know, there's a couple reveals, there's a death here or there, but besides the twin reveal, there hasn't yet been that much of consequence. Like, we already knew that Boon faked his death and was working with the Red Devil, so his reappearance is fun, but it's not that shocking. And I think around here is where I felt myself getting a bit impatient with the show. Like, I was kind of hoping that there would finally be a big main character death or something that, you know, the mom reveal for Grace would have more of an impact on the plot later down the line. And the plot for this show is relatively simple, so the writers can't really like move the plot along quickly because they'd have to reveal who the Red Devil is. But the snail-paced story, in my opinion, is starting to drag a bit. And I'm flagging these issues now because, one, they're going to continue throughout the rest of the season, and two, they're going to get worse in the second season. Anyway, let's continue because we are currently 2/3 of the way through the season. Episode 9, Ghost Stories. Boon is strolling around Wallace University and he runs into Chanel number 3, who thinks he's a ghost.
Fine. Okay, caught me. I'm
a ghost.
She goes back to Kappa and is like, oh my god, guys, I saw the ghost of dead gay Boon. Pretty much everybody else knows that this means that he is alive, and they're kind of spiraling. Denise is like, when I get scared, I like to tell scary stories because then I get scared of the stories and not real life. Actually, this just occurred to me, quite a reflection on why we watch and consume horror media. Because we can be scared of that media and get our mind off our real fears. Interesting. Denise tells the girls 2 scary Japanese folklore stories. Why they're both Japanese folklore, I don't know. Then Denise is attacked in the bathroom by the Red Devil in the exact manner that she described one of the scary stories. And in the same vein, Chanel number 5 decides that she's going to pack up and leave, but she's also attacked by the Red Devil in the same manner as a ghost story Hester told. So this could mean that the Red Devil was just listening in, or like had bugged Kappa or something, who's recreating that. Or it could be someone who was in the room. We don't know. The Red Devil kills a trucker who tried to warn Chanel number 5. I'm not going to put him on the board because he's not really relevant. Like, he literally shows up and then dies 10 seconds later. But he is technically a part of the death tally. Boon appears to Chad and he's like, hey, can I borrow your date shirt? I want to boo Zayday. You might be confused by this because you might think, wait, I thought Boon was gay. Put a pin in that for now. We're going to come back to that. Zayday has been dating Earl Grey. That's his real full name. And when Earl Grey goes to get some supplies from his dorm room, he's murdered by the Red Devil. And the Red Devil takes off his mask. Boon. Rest in peace, Earl Grey. Boon goes to Zayday, and Zayday knows that this is not the ghost of dead gay Boon. This is Boon. She puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that he was the Red Devil that kidnapped her because he has the scars from when she stabbed him with a fork. And then her and Grace push him out the window, but when they go to the window and look out, he's gone. And this is a very like slasher or horror move where they like kill the serial killer or something, but they end up just disappearing. It happens in the classic 1978 Halloween. Boon thinks that the other Red Devil will help him kill Gigi, but the Red Devil ends up double crossing him and killing Boon. Rest in peace, Boon. For real this time. Meanwhile, Chad and Chanel are getting serious. And Chad and Chanel do a thing called compliment hour, where Chad compliments Chanel for an hour.
You're so hot, you give my bone a bone.
Thank you for that compliment, Chad.
And I am not messing. Today I was on TikTok and I was looking at Becca Bloom's account, who, if you don't know, is this like wealthy billionaire influencer who people say that she's like riching right. I disagree. Anyways, she made a video with her husband and she was like, 5 things that we do to like keep our relationship healthy. One of them, compliment hour, where he compliments her for an hour.
Things in our marriage that just make sense.
Once a week, I'll sit Becca down and compliment her for an hour straight. And
I do enjoy our compliment hour.
Does art imitate life? Or does life imitate art? Chanel and Chad, they're serious, and he invites her to spend Thanksgiving with his family. Hester is absolutely raging with jealousy, and she lies to Chad saying that she's pregnant so that he will take her to Thanksgiving instead. Chanel is obviously raging at Hester because she knows she's lying, and she pushes her down the stairs. The episode ends with Hester lying still at the bottom of the stairs. It looks like she's dead, but we don't know for sure yet. Death tally, Earl Grey, Boon, maybe Hester. Trucker is technically there, but I didn't put him in. So, Boon was a Red Devil, but he is now dead. Gigi is still leading the charge with the mystery killer. Episode 10, Thanksgiving. And this is my least favorite episode of the season. It feels like a filler, and you'll see why. Not much happens for the majority of the episode, and then like 2 important things happen at the very end. So I'll skim over it and I'll point out the fun parts.
No one wants to spend a room service Thanksgiving alone.
Chanel goes to the Radwells for Thanksgiving and meets his mom, dad, and his brothers Thad and Brad, who are played by Chad Michael Murray and Patrick Schwarzenegger. It is hilarious because they both have like 4 lines total. Surprise! Hester is alive. She survived the fall down the stairs because of her neck brace and because the Chanels put her in the freezer, which actually ended up helping with her swelling. The Radwells shun and humiliate both of the girls. Despite the fact that Chanel is filthy rich herself, they call her a gold digger, and then they call Hester neck brace whore.
Hello, Mother. It's me. Chanel Oberlin, your daughter? Are you drunk? Okay, drunk on wine is still drunk, Mother.
Chanel sticks up for her sorority sister and they leave. Back at Kappa, everybody's having a family Thanksgiving.
Wow, I knew it took so long to cook a turkey.
Everyone takes turns giving their theories on who they think the Red Devil is. Their suspicions swing from one to another, and this basically shows how many red herrings there are, and it parodies how quickly the audience and the characters are quick to suspect and then drop their suspicions. But as I said, it's just a circle of red herrings and does nothing to move the plot forward until Wes, Grace's dad, is accused, and we get a bombshell from Mr. Investigative Journalist Pete. He compared Boon's DNA to Wes's and discovered that Wes is Boon's father, which also means that he is the father to the other baby in the bathtub. So the family tree looks a little something like this. Wes doesn't remember hooking up with Sophia Doyle, aka the bathtub Kappa, but he did. And the wow, one of our main characters is actually related to the killer. This secret sibling / secret child trope is big in horror. And I feel like this worked well. I feel like the timeline worked. It doesn't feel like it's shoehorned in. The only disappointing thing with this is that it actually doesn't have much impact on the killers or on the killers' motivations, as we'll see. But that's all I'll say for now. Chanel, Hester, and Chad arrive at Kappa. Chanel and Chad have made up, and they sit down for Thanksgiving dinner, but instead of a turkey, they get Gigi's head on a plate. Rest in peace to Gigi. 2 of our 3 killers have themselves been killed, which leaves us with the female baby in the bathtub. We now know that Wes is their father, and it's a fun twist. Episode 11, Black Friday. This episode is a slasher in a mall, and there's a lot of slashers that take place in a mall. 1978's Dawn of the Dead, 1984's The Initiation is about sorority pledges who are stalked around an abandoned department store. Side note, I love this poster. And of course, most classic of all, Paul Blart Mall Cop. The mall setting is very in line with 80s nostalgia and with odes to slashers that we've seen throughout the show. And it also fits that if you're going to do a horror set in a shopping center, you should do it the scariest shopping day of the year. Black Friday.
Black Friday is about buying deliberately cheap, totally forgettable Christmas gifts for friends.
The Chanels are Black Friday shopping when they are attacked by the Red Devil. The Red Devil shoots Chanel in the shoulder with a crossbow, but thank God, the chief of police, Denise Hemphill, arrives to save the day. The entire police department was fired for their incompetence, and Denise is now chief, but when she's bragging about catching the Red Devil,
skills to catch. Damn, he shot him!
The Red Devil shoots a cop and escapes. Everyone is convinced that the Red Devil is Dean Munch, so the girls make several failed attempts to kill her, including poisoning her with pufferfish venom and then freezing her in a cryogenic chamber, but nothing works. Investigative journalist power duo Pete and Grace find out that Gigi's real name was Jess Meyer, and her sister was Amy Meyer, the sorority sister from the bathtub incident, and Amy ended up taking her own life, and Gigi/Jess had a mental breakdown after and raised the twins in an asylum. Chad is very suspicious when announcing Boon's will. I love the fact that his gavel is a golf club.
My butt plug with a beautiful blue jewel on the business end? Pete Martinez.
Boon has left everything to Pete. Pete says that Boon was his source inside Dickie Dollar Scholars for his sorority/frat piece, but Chad is suspicious because Pete tried and failed to pledge the Dickie Dollar Scholars. Grace decides to sleep with Pete, but he stops her and says,
I don't want your first time to be with a murderer.
Interesting cliffhanger. There aren't really any updates to the suspect list or to the death tally, besides that random cop who, again, like the trucker, appeared and 10 seconds later was killed. We've gotten some extra posthumous information on why Gigi decided to orchestrate a killing spree, as revenge for her sister. But this episode felt very much like a filler. You could probably tell by how short the summary was. And I feel like you could skip it completely, and besides Pete revealing that he's a murderer at the end, it doesn't really change anything. And with only 2 episodes left in the season, the plot and mystery is starting to stretch very thin. And if you watch it, you might find that the camp or the comedy is enough to offset the kind of frustration of the lack of plot. But at this point for me, it felt like it was getting a bit repetitive and I just wanted more. Our penultimate episode, episode 12, Dorcas. Picking up on that cliffhanger, Pete explains to Grace that he has been working with the Red Devil ever since Hell Week, which was episode 2. So he is actually responsible for a lot of deaths. Initially, he agreed to help so that his life would be spared, but then when the Red Devil started explaining his motivations, he was like, wait, this devil has some good points. We should destroy the Greek system. In my opinion, this doesn't make much sense. Like, I know Pete already wanted to take down the Greek system through like a journalistic piece, and I don't really know why he kept working on that if he were just going to kill everybody in the sorority and the frat. And speaking of deaths, the majority of people who were killed were either not involved in Greek life or were at like the bottom of the totem pole. So I don't know why he wouldn't go straight for the Chanels or straight for like Chad. Why did Coney have to die? So full of life. The killer being the like boyfriend / love interest is also a common horror trope, and Grace is horrified. Again, I love the dramatic film noir-esque lighting here. And you might think, oh, Pete is our third killer, the second Red Devil. There's still another Red Devil. And right when Pete is about to reveal their identity, they spring out of the closet and they kill him. Rest in peace, Pete. Chanel is furious when her minions fail to help her kill Dean Munch, and she sends a torrent of abuse over email. You can catch a little glimpse here. Attention all useless Kappa sluts. Congratulations. If you're reading this, it means you've overcome the limitations of your tiny manatee brains and opened an email.
You all should seriously consider doing the human race a favor and getting sterilized. I'm not being facetious.
And the Red Devil goes into her computer and forwards this email to everyone at Wallace. People are not happy. Even Barack Obama is disappointed. This rant was inspired by a real-life email from a sorority girl in the University of Maryland, and her email has a venom that rivals or even surpasses Chanel Oberlin, which is difficult.
If you're reading this right now, you're saying to yourself, OMG, Becca, I've been having so much fun with my sisters this week. Then punch yourself in the face right now.
After briefly considering killing herself with an asp that she ordered online.
This isn't an asp. It's a garter snake.
No, it isn't. Look at its markings.
This is a sweater.
Chanel attempts to redeem her image by going on an apology tour, and her first stop is the Dorcas residence. Melanie Dorcas, if you remember, was the former Kappa president who got disfigured after a sulfuric acid spray tan. The three Chanels go to the Dorcas residence, but Chanel number 5 leaves after getting her first ever Tinder match.
Somebody just swiped right on me on Tinder. I called the company because I thought that the app was broken.
Chanel starts off apologizing to Melanie after she says that she looks like Freddy Krueger, but then tries to stab her, accusing her of being the Red Devil. But then she's halted by the dramatic entrance of Zayde and Grace. They've been snooping and they think that they know who the killer is. So Grace convinced her dad to sleep with Dean Munch, and I feel like this is a fun little subversion because normally it's women who are the honeypot and forced to exploit their sexuality. And while they're getting busy, Grace and Zayde break into the school records. They discover one Kappa has faked their transcripts and has taken classes in anatomy, sewing, and domestic terrorism. All skills the Red Devil possesses.
Her social security number is 123456789, and her home address is Sesame Street.
They reveal this Kappa is Hester. But when they go to confront Hester back at Kappa, they find her with a stiletto sticking out of her eye. She wakes up, points at Chanel number 5, and says, Red Devil. So who is it? Is it Hester? Is it Chanel number 5? All the evidence points to Hester, but Hester literally pointed at Chanel number 5. All is revealed in our finale, episode 13, Final Girls. Not to be confused with the 2015 film, The Final Girls, which is also not to be confused with the other 2015 film, Final Girl. Final Girl, of course, is the term for the last surviving girl in a slasher. So it fits that this episode is called Final Girls, because we're going to see who lives and who dies. The finale feels less like a finale and more like a really long epilogue. There's not much action. There's a lot of explanation. We've jumped forward a month from the events of last episode. I wasn't a huge fan of this time jump because I feel like it kind of messed with the pacing and like erased any tension that was built up. That's just my 2 cents. I don't know if this is intentional because it's like peaceful now. This like time tile is no longer like 3D and dripping. I don't know if it's like a stylistic inconsistency or if it's intentional. Kappa are having another rush week, but there's a distinct lack of Chanel here. Kappa House have rebranded and they've moved away from the hostile, exclusionary, hierarchical model to be more inclusive and feminist. Zayde, Grace, and Hester are in charge. As Zayde and Grace speak to the new pledges, Hester turns to the camera and we hear from her in a voiceover.
You might have noticed that I'm the only Chanel left. That's because I got away with it.
She reveals herself to be the true Red devil. She is the baby from the bathtub, and she grew up with her twin brother Boon in the asylum, raised by Gigi to be murder machines bent on revenge. Hester decided to go undercover and fake scoliosis by stealing another patient's neck brace because she thinks that that's going to make her get into college easier, which she was correct about. And she noticed that the more weird and gross you are, the less people want to know you. Boon and Hester were responsible for the Melanie Dorcas spray tan from hell. She faked the stiletto stabbing in her eye to frame Chanel number 5. She hired actors to play her parents so that nobody would know she was the baby from the bathtub. And she convinced Chanel number 5's parents to lie and say that they adopted Chanel number 5 and that she was the baby in the bathtub. Not only that, she also framed Chanel number 3 by creating fake psychiatrist notes that say that she has a split personality disorder, that her other personality is a murderer, and that she got advice from her biological father, Charles Manson. Finally, she frames Chanel number 1 by dressing up as her and buying all the murder weapons with her credit card. All 3 Chanels are found guilty and imprisoned in the asylum.
Look at these hippos. These are not my peers. And to see that the 3 of us...
But we're going to come back to them in a little bit. Hester's logic doesn't make total sense to me because she says she spared Grace and Zayde because they were nice to her, but then why did she kill Tiffany, Jennifer, and Sam? I don't know. Denise Hemphill is off to Quantico to join the FBI, and her and Chad have been seeing each other, and they tearfully break up.
It was never going to work out between us.
We got too close to the sun, baby.
Chad Radwell has made a charity to honor his fallen brothers. Dean Munch has become a worldwide sensation, best-selling author due to the success of her ghostwritten book, New Feminism. And she's dating Grace's dad, Wes, after he fell in love with her from sleeping together once. Munch knows Hester was actually the killer, but Hester could expose Munch for the baby in the bathtub palabra, so they agree to go their separate ways.
Okay, great. Take care.
You too.
The Chanels are thriving in the asylum. Chanel number 3 is in a relationship with one of the nurses. Chanel number 5 is on meds that, according to Chanel number 1, make her actually likable. And they love life in the asylum. Chanel acts as like house president for all the patients. But one night, she's going to bed and she gets all tucked in, all cuddly and cozy in her bed. She hears a noise, takes off her eye mask and looks up. The Red Devil is standing over her. She screams, cut to black, end of season 1. How are we all feeling? Good? Let's talk about it. Ryan Murphy lied to you and to me. He lied to all of us. He said in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter that only 4 characters would make it out alive. He said, and I quote, "At the end of the first season, there will only be 4 characters out of 25 left." We've seen a lot of people die. There's no doubt about that. But out of our main cast, a lot of them are still alive. They may be imprisoned or institutionalized, sure, but they're alive. Chanel 1, 3, and 5, alive. Grace and Zayde, alive. Hester, alive. Denise Hemphill, alive. Chad Radwell, alive. Wes, alive. Munch, alive. And I hate to say it, but this show would have been more interesting if less of these characters ended up happy and alive. I feel like Ryan Murphy got too attached to the characters, especially the Chanels, and he did not want to give up Jamie Lee Curtis. And I think that he didn't kill anyone off because he wanted them for season 2. And this is what I think is a huge issue with Scream Queens is it doesn't have the like anthological format that American Horror Story does, where each season has a new story and new characters, but a lot of the cast will still carry over. Season 2 of Scream Queens follows a lot of the same characters, but I think it would have worked a lot better if they just killed off characters in the first season and didn't have to worry about preserving them for a second season, because at the end of the day, this was a slasher. And in most slashers, almost everyone dies. You don't have the majority of the main cast alive. I said this at our halfway check-in and not much changed. So many of the deaths were very low stakes and of very low impact. From the beginning to the end, the characters don't change all that much. And yes, that is kind of campy in that like it's ridiculous and they're silly and goofy. But on a story level, it feels like a lot of things happening to these characters and not really these characters doing much. And the mystery was stretched very thin across 13 episodes. The red herrings and the like inconsequential twists I felt started to get a bit tired, and a bit boring. I think there's a reason that the slasher genre tends to be in film rather than TV, because it's hard to maintain suspense and interest and like find that balance between who to kill off and who to remain. And I don't think that this season struck that balance. As per the Red Devil's identity, I feel like the twins from the bathtub and Gigi made sense, but I don't understand why Pete was thrown in there. I think that felt unnecessary and didn't have much payoff, given that he revealed these things and then was immediately killed. And we learned that Pete was the one to kill Boon in order to like take down the Red Devil operation. Like he thought it went too far, but he was persuaded by the anti-Greek life argument. So the whole thing just feels quite muddy. Also, Hester reveals in her monologue that Boon wasn't gay and just pretended to be. I don't really get the point of that. I think it's explained that like he pretended to be gay so that he would get into the Dickie Dollar Scholars, but he's actually just an idiot and he thought this would help him get in, but in reality it wouldn't. But then he ended up closeted anyways. So I don't really get the point of it. I feel like they set him up as gay and then they just needed a reason to explain why Zayde was kidnapped and went back and changed it. Overall, I love the aesthetic of Scream Queens. I love the costuming, especially Chanel No. 1's. Like, it was divine. This was my favorite outfit. I really appreciated the references to classic horror films and to like the slasher genre as a whole. I think the humor was hit or miss, as we discussed. Some of it was great. Some of it left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Especially there was a lot of like woke millennial jokes, and maybe it was funny for some in like the Obama era, but at this point it feels like a very overused, unfunny, like snowflake cliche.
I'm gonna go disinvite Jerry Seinfeld from speaking at commencement. He told a joke about a woman once. Allegedly.
There were some standout performances. Glenn Powell as Chad Bradwell, Niecy Nash as Denise Hemphill, Emma Roberts as Chanel No. 1 were my faves. I love Keke Palmer as an actress. I think she's fantastic, but I feel like Zayde was underused in this show, and I think they should have done more with her. And I'm gonna give you a heads up, it gets even worse in season 2. I liked Billy Lord, as you can see. Okay, I don't know if this is down to the performance or the writing. I feel like it might be down to writing and direction, but Dean Munch started to feel like a ripoff of Sue Sylvester after a while. You know, this like figure in power who hates kids and is always insulting and belittling them. I found this issue as well with Ryan Murphy's show All's Fair, where Sarah Paulson's character feels like a ripoff of Sue Sylvester. I've been analyzing All's Fair in TikToks and like YouTube shorts, episode by episode, but at the end of the season I will be doing a full video breakdown on it, just like this. Abigail Breslin was a real low for me. I really didn't think her performance was funny or good. I know sometimes that she really rushed the delivery of her lines and they just got kind of like jumbled up. I haven't seen her act in much besides Little Miss Sunshine when she was a kid, so I don't know if it's a lack of comedic skill or of acting. And I feel confident in saying this because I think in season 2 she's also a low point. I think the first half of Scream Queens was definitely the show at its strongest. I think this is also a Ryan Murphy pattern where he will have good concepts and will have good starts to seasons, but then they kind of like peter out. I did really enjoy watching the first season overall. It did get dragged out, but it still had enough to keep me interested, whether it was like the humor or the fun red herrings, etc. Can I say the same for season 2? You're just gonna have to watch my next video and find out. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed this PowerPoint presentation deep dive. It helps both YouTube and me know what kind of stuff you like. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Thank you again to my patrons. Special shout out to Kelly T, Paula Boon, Icarus Moore, Angela Jovanich, Eric Danielson, Cecilia Diarval, and my Sharpay Evans tier patrons.